Okay, welcome to the Seattle Code Crafters Meetup. Uh, my name is Paige Watson. I'm joined with by Steve Quo, and we are a language agnostic group that is fully focused on bringing better quality practices to software development in our industry. Everyone is welcome here. Today we have Dustin. Uh, sorry, I have to switch back. Dustin Thornton, Thorstenson. I always say that weirdly wrong. Um, who, uh, who,
Thos- Some people say Thostenson, but
which would you prefer that I say?
Dustinson.
Dustinson. Okay, I like that one. Um, who's an independent consultant leading Delta 3 Consulting. He's out of Iowa and he runs the Iowa.net users group. He's a developer, a mentor, a trainer, an agile coach, and has been so for decades. And he's also a really good friend. So it's really I'm pleased to have him back and join us. So Dustin, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Paige. All right. Hope I can share my screen here. You guys are all seeing that?
Yes.
I couldn't find a logo, so I made one.
Nice.
So hopefully that works, unless you guys said something different. Um, yeah, as I was thinking about that, I was trying to think, like, who's my favorite person from Seattle? We got Steve, who shares my Nordic ancestry, and Paige, who's tall with long hair. So I kind of thought about it, and then I realized this is my favorite Seattle son. Sorry.
Nice. Yes.
So yeah, I'm Dustin. The talk today is techniques to tackle tech debt today. Give yourself 3 bonus points if you were thinking alliteration. Uh, this has been a pretty important conversation for me just because I think every team I've worked with have had tech debt problems. And I've had a lot of conversations, a lot of experiences, and a lot of failures addressing this issue. So I'd like to share some of those concepts with you. Normally, what are we done at the top of the hour? We got a hard stop. I'm assuming a 60-minute session.
Nope. As long as you want.
All right. Well, then I'm going to talk about my shocking opener.
Okay.
So about 7 years ago, when we moved into this house, I remember walking into our closet and I was very confused because the lights were off. And then later on in the day, I walked into the closet again and I was very confused because the lights were on. And I realized that at our old house, I had switched out all of the light switches. I had the room sensors. And I put a lot of work into thinking which room do I want to automatically turn on and off? Which rooms do I want to manually turn on but automatically turn off? It's a pretty tough problem. Our fuse box is in the garage. And I started switching the light switches out. And eventually I started getting tired because I'd have to walk all the way out, turn the switch off, turn the breaker off, come back, swap out the light, and eventually, I realized, as long as you just keep the wires separate, yeah, Steve knows where this is going. I think I electrocuted myself about a dozen times in the span of 2 weeks, and I found every possible point of failure to do that. It seems easy. You take the screws out, pull it out gently, bend one wire up, don't make sure to touch them, but things would happen. My hand would twitch and the screwdriver would make a connection and I'd get shocked. There'd be a little tension in the wire, so as soon as I let it go, it would bounce out and hit my hand. Um, it was a pretty stupid thing to do, but I thought, I'm trying to be lazy. I'm going to cut some corners. I think as long as I do it safe, I should be fine. And I learned that wasn't the case. But when I had a friend come over and hook up the charger in my garage for my car, um, I realized I was not going to ask him to cut corners. For the work that he would do, I would not ask another professional. I would not try to dictate how they work because I realize that professionals are hired to act like professionals. And I think this kind of builds off of Raul's comment earlier when we were chatting. We are professionals here and we should act like professionals. And there are things that we should feel comfortable and confident doing that we don't allow other people to tell us how to cut the corners. A lot of times, because we will cede to that pressure, even though we get paid like professionals, but we might not be certified as such, we will often lessen our craft because somebody else requested, and then we have all these other problems that pop up later. So this is really kind of focus on like, as professionals, how can we act like professionals? And even if we make mistakes in the past, what can we do to improve ourselves? My electrocution story does have kind of a happy ending because I finally fixed one of the three-way switches in our basement after my daughter was complaining about it right before she left to college, which means she wasn't going to use it anymore. It took me a couple hours to really figure out that uh, the right wires to put in the right spots. I kept going back and forth, and this time I treated the fuse breaker as a feature, not a bug. I got 2,500 steps in, and I think 8 to 10 flights of stairs. So I realized that by going up and down, I was getting some exercise. So it made my step counter happy. So we can learn things. Big problem statement here. Tech debt is slowing our ability to deliver. I'm not going to get into the details of what tech debt is. I know that we all probably have our own examples of what we think it is and isn't. Not going to get into the credit card example. From a perspective of flow, do we have things that are getting in our way of being able to do the things that we want? When an opportunity comes into our team, how quickly and confidently can we get to a positive outcome for the people using our software? That's kind of the overall view of this. And we can often know that this is a problem because when we have to change our software, it gets to be really expensive. If we look at that blue line here, we know that the very first applications we built are going to go really quick. And as we build on top of that, it's going to take some time naturally. If we're building on top of a really shaky foundation, that cost really starts to go up, and our ability to predict or our ability to meet people's needs with some predictability really starts to drop. So if we get into that spot where somebody just wants another feature and we realize it's going to take so much more time because of all the junk that we have to deal with, that's probably a good indicator that tech debt is having a real and costly impact on our company's ability to make people happy. I'm going to be talking about hard topics and soft topics. Um, I'm going to assume we're mostly technical people here. This talk has also been well received for Scrum Masters and product owners, testers, managers. There's going to be a lot of things because I've realized that as much as I like when I can get a piece of code and I can just focus on that one thing, as Jerry Weinberg says, despite what clients tell you, that the technical problems are really just people problems. So we're going to talk about both sides of that coin. And I'm also going to kind of talk at three different levels, ourselves, the things that we can do, our teams, the things that our team can do to improve this problem, and the stakeholders. It's not, I wish I had a single solution. I wish I had a box with a product that I could sell with a Venmo where you could just give me the money and plug it in. Maybe AI will do that in the future. I'm not smart enough to have boxed up this solution where I could just pay for it or where you could pay me for it. All right, so the first step is self. Um, I've realized personally that the only person I can control is myself. I can't control anybody else, and that's hard enough as it is. But before we start looking outside at all the other reasons we have these issues, let's take a look at what we can do for ourselves. I've been to a lot of teams. I've worked at dozens of companies, hundreds of teams, thousands of developers, and I hear this problem. We have tech debt. Okay, cool. What have you tried to do so far? No, we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. So maybe that first step is let's abandon apathy. Let's quit just putting it outside of us and start saying, what can we really do about this? Jerry Weinberg, I'll be quoting him a lot. He says, things are the way they are because they got that way. And I know that that's such a simple statement. Most of Jerry's statements are simple like that, but they're extremely profound. Yeah, we've got a mess. We can spend a bunch of time blaming anybody else for why we have that mess. It's not going to do anything. You know, we made decisions, we got products to market, we had to make things work really quick. It is what it is. What we get to do is we get to choose from today, what are we going to do to move forward? We got to think about what it is that we really have control over. What are the things that we can influence? And what are those areas that are part of our concern? At one client, we did a workshop. We brought in all the developers for one session, all the managers for another. We had these circles on some panels with a bunch of sticky notes around it. And we asked the developers, what are the things that you have control over? Do you control your team's name? Do you control what goes into your sprint? Do you control how you write the code, your naming conventions, tabs versus spaces, whatever? We had a list of all these things, all the way up to bonuses. Do you have control over how bonuses are allocated? When we did that, the team put most of those items in that influence or concern area. The team did feel they had control to write if statements and for loops. So that made it in the center. When we held the second session with the managers, the majority of this stuff was put in here. And we realized there was a huge disconnect between what the leaders and managers thought the teams should be controlling and what the teams thought they should control. That was a pretty eye-opening experience, and it started helping the team to realize maybe there are things that we can do. Maybe it's worth taking that shot. Real quick, I think every talk I give has something on the responsibility process. This has been one of the most important lessons I've learned in my life, professionally, personally. I would highly recommend that you look into it more. I will have a QR code at the end of the session so you can get access to links. But the basic concept here is that when we see a problem, mentally we go through a variety of steps. And it's just like the stages of grief. If we see a problem, oftentimes we might first deny that the problem exists, either consciously or unconsciously. That little guy, yeah, I won't worry about that little guy. After that, when that problem continues to occur, we start to look outside of ourselves and blame other people for it. We didn't make the production launch because Paige took some time off. We didn't make the production launch because we allowed Steve to code, right? You're looking at all these other reasons why these things can't happen, and you are completely helpless from it. When you're done telling yourselves those stories, you can start coming up with justification stories. Yeah, we never hit our production launches on time. It never happens here. QA never gets it done on time. We never get good enough specs, blah, blah, blah. These are red because they're negative. You're completely helpless with it. Once you start getting to shame, it's kind of like you're blaming yourself. Man, if I wasn't such an idiot, if I wrote better tests, if I focused on thinking about what would happen if we didn't have this data, I probably could have avoided these problems. We could have hit the production launch. And sometimes that's where it ends. We beat up on ourselves for being human. And oftentimes we quit from there. Sometimes people might move up to obligation where they feel I owe it to my team. I'm going to work nights and weekends. It's the have to, don't want to mindset. And you might be doing the right things, but for the wrong reasons. When you eventually cross this line, you can step into responsibility. And it's not responsibility like accountability, it's really the ability to respond. And this is so important for me, just like a unit test, when you can identify where you're at and where you want to be, you can see where you want to be, and then you get to make choices on how you want to get there. So I'm putting this out there because if you're dealing with tech debt, you have the ability, you have the choice to do something about it if you want. And we can kind of get into the skill and will area here. If you have high will and high skill, you can get it done. If you have the will to do it, but you don't have the skill, that's okay. You can invest some time either by yourself or working with others to build up that skill. If you have the ability and you don't want to, or you don't have the will or skill, that's kind of not really a recipe for success. I look at myself through this lens. I look at my teams through this lens. When people tell me they have the will and they don't have the skill, I will invest time into building that skill. And then once they have that skill and things aren't happening, I recognize it really wasn't a technical problem. They just did not want to do it. Some people enjoy it. They like having the simplicity of, living in a dirty house and blaming everybody else and not wanting to do anything about it. So if we find ourselves in a hole, step one is quit digging. How do you know that you're in a hole? Well, you might want to be able to start identifying some code smells, the symptoms of poor design or implementation choices. You have to recognize that things are going bad first and not just kind of be surprised by them later. If this is difficult for you, you might want to get better at it. Here's an example. I've worked with some of the folks here at Industrial Logic. I'm stealing their slide. They've got some training where they show this nice piece of Java code here. How does that make everybody feel? Not so good. Can you tell me why you don't like it? If you have feelings and this just feels bad, that's fine. And that's a good first step. But when you're working with somebody else and you're trying to compare your feelings to their feelings, sometimes it's nicer to have words. So we can say, well, there's some duplicate code here. We've got alternative classes with different interfaces, inappropriate intimacy. We should not have to dive deep into um, the elements, or maybe we have a refused bequest. Like there are words for all of these types of things. So now when you see the bad code, if you're mobbing or pairing, you can actually say, looks like we should have used a switch statement here. Looks like we've got a long method. So allow yourself to identify that you're in the hole quicker. And there's these things have all been kind of figured out. Josh Kirievsky has got a book, Refactoring to Patterns. And every time you can identify one of these smells, there are things that you can do. You can build adapters, there's patterns, you can rename methods or move methods. You start to get that trigger and response built. So when you see things, it's not just a matter of let's make another story and then we'll let the product owner decline our ability to fix it later. You should be able to just make these changes quickly. And if you have to, do a little bit of reading. Michael Feathers wrote this book working effectively with legacy code because he learned a lot of things about that. And people were always asking him questions. And he thought maybe if I just write the book, people will keep or they'll quit bugging me. And the exact opposite has happened. People continue to request Michael come in, give talks, help them out. But once you learn these types of things, it becomes a lot easier to make those changes. I'm going to skip over a couple of them. And there's things that you can do first. Testing. Find a way to write some tests around what you have. Maybe you got to set up a Docker image so you can have a local database and spin up the APIs. You don't have to have low level tests necessarily. Just figure out some way to say, I ran a test, the code works, I'm going to make a change, it still does the thing that we want to, and and give yourself a little bit of confidence instead of just changing stuff. Kent talks about make the change easy, then make the easy change. That's a phrase that a lot of people remember, but oftentimes they forget this other part here where he says, warning, this may be hard. So I think about this and the concept of prefactoring. Prefactoring to me is just refactoring the code once we see it, get it cleaned up so we don't have any of those smells, and then apply the changes to that. If those changes are hard, if you're not comfortable with being able to make those simple changes, try some code katas. I mean, it's just like martial arts. You block, you punch, you kick. You do those things in isolation so they become muscle memory. And then when you need to block, punch, or kick, you don't have to think about it. You just do it. You dribble a ball, you dribble a basketball, you practice free throws, you practice three-pointers. You work on the muscle memory of things so when you need to employ it, you don't have to think about it. Gilded Rose is a great kata. I do have links to Emily Baisha's website. She's got a GitHub repo with, I think, pretty much every kata known to developers and in all different languages. So grab one of those katas, work on it yourself. If it's not easy for you to refactor something quickly, if you're not used to the keyboard shortcuts for selecting the contents of an if statement and extracting it to a method, if the only keyboard shortcuts you have are copy and paste, practice them. Build up that muscle memory so you can see the change or see the problem and quickly implement the change. If you think that you have to type it out, maybe you could find ways to improve that execution so you can get this stuff done quicker. And then you just do it. Just make the change. Don't worry about it. Don't spend time talking about it. Just clean it up. You start to get these habits rolling where you recognize the cue, you can identify the problem, you know what routine to kick into, and then you get that little dopamine kick. And this should be a very frequent routine. It gets to be fun for you. Maybe there's some downsides to it, but the truth is, I don't care. I enjoy refactoring code. I love cleaning things up. And despite as messy as my office might seem, I really do actually appreciate clean things because you can do it quickly, you feel good about it, you feel better when you get back into it. And it's an ongoing process. It doesn't end. You might get to the point where you can get something really clean and you look at the greater application and it's a complete mess, but that's fine because when other people are coming in there, they're going to recognize this. They're going to recognize those patterns. They're not just going to copy and paste this. They're not just going to squeeze one more wire in there. Leave something that other people can replicate. It doesn't have to be across the entire app, but at least you can make those little changes and start learning. So that alone is probably enough to end the talk on. Everybody should have some work that they could go back and keep improving. It doesn't end. But when you start to get outside of yourself and you start looking at the team, okay, well, what can I do to help my team become better? Team katas can be a really good habit to build. Paired programming sucks. Mob programming sucks. All we do is we just sit there and watch Patrick code. He doesn't talk to us. We have to guess what he's thinking. A lot of us have learned technology either through education or by reading books or watching YouTube videos. We learn how to do the technical thing. Few of us have invested much time into figuring out how do I work with other people. These katas can be a really good way to get people together, go through the learning pains, find ways to communicate, articulate what you're thinking instead of just grabbing the keyboard and doing it. The more that you can start to develop a vocabulary, the more that you can start to develop a pattern. If you find that you can work together on these types of things, where all you're doing it's just practicing. You're not thinking about the business problem you're trying to solve. You're not thinking about all the weird use cases and all the data issues. You're not thinking about how we have to hit this deadline. You're thinking, how can we work together? I've seen teams take a lot of different approaches with this. Sometimes they figure 15 minutes after stand up, 15 minutes before stand up. Every Wednesday, we have our planning meeting at 10 to 11, and we have that dead hour before noon that I don't really want to go and, start solving code problems and then go to lunch. Find a time to get the team together and just start practicing these things. You're going to learn a lot from each other. I know that the divide and conquer model is very logical. A lot of teams will try to split the work up because it just makes sense. You all go do your thing, we'll all come back together, it'll be more efficient. I hear the word efficient used so many more times in enterprises than effective. But what usually happens is something happens to one person. Somebody has a defect that they have to stop work and work on. Somebody else might go down a rabbit hole and solve the wrong problem. We don't bring all the pieces together. It's great theory, but we usually blame that stuff happens and not blame that we actually probably took a bad approach right off the bat. All these divide and conquer things, we can talk about all the other problems that happen. I have a PR, but somebody else is working on something different. When everybody is focused on their own worlds, it's very distracting. You're not pulled together solving the same problems. That's not teamwork. That's like calling people crossing the street a team. It's a group of individuals that have the same sort of goal for the short period of time. Find ways to actually work together. Woody Zool has introduced the mob ensemble programming. I know that Steve and Paige have taken concepts of this and some other areas, working with fast agile. Whatever you decide to do, find a way to actually work together so the whole team is focused on a problem. So you solve the problem. You're not optimizing for your own output, but you're optimizing to get stuff done. It can make a huge difference. It can take some practice, and if you throw people together in a room, they're probably going to say it sucks because they haven't even gone through and figured out how to do the thing right. And I've seen this a lot. I've seen people use words in a way that doesn't really work. I don't care if you want to kick a hockey puck into a basketball hoop. Kick a hockey puck into a basketball hoop. Just don't call it cricket. That's not what cricket is. If you're throwing people together and you don't even understand how to work as a team, if you don't understand the different roles that people should have, then you're not doing that thing. So learn about it, give it a try, find ways to work together, and then choose what's working and what's not for you. This is a slide that some people get mad at me for. Product owners and scrum masters decide the team's work. We can't solve our tech debt because the PO won't approve the story. It's in the Scrum guide, they tell us. That's how Scrum works. That's not true. Not to get into all the details here, but I actually went through the I went through the Scrum guide because I'm willing to do that for you. I will incur that pain so you don't have to. But it talks about, the plan is created by the entire team. The backlog is a plan by and for the developers. Again, we're professionals. Product owners and scrum masters are not a hierarchical role where they get to tell other people what to do. They are an incredibly important part of the team, but the entire team needs to work together. And if part of that means that I have to clean the kitchen before I can make dinner, then you're going to do that. You're not going to just say, yeah, just keep cooking. Don't worry about all the dirty dishes. Don't worry about the dirty knives. That's not really a choice. It's a balance. It's a trade-off, but it is not one directional. And it's easy to look at all of the things that need to get fixed. If you're a developer and you're complaining about tech debt, find a way to focus. One example here, is this is an old tool. There's some better tools now, but you could actually get an understanding of your health by looking at and you can run this tool against your GitHub repo. You can look at what files are most complex, which files are changing the most. And if you take a look at that, you can start to identify these two guys are they're not great, but we're in there a lot. So this might be a good spot to actually clean up because we're in there often. This guy over here, this is my shed. It's a mess, but I don't go in there that much. It does what it needs. When I have to do it, fine. I could maybe try to clean it up, but if we're not touching it that much, if you've got that piece of code that's running the business, and as long as you don't touch it, it just works, that's okay. But figure out where you want to focus. So when these files come up for another feature, you can know, hey, we got a little cleaning up to do here. And for some of these other areas, yeah, maybe we get to them. Maybe there's nothing to do here. I'm going to apologize for the complexity of this screen. There is nothing that I want you to read on here. I could probably blur it out. I just wanted to, this is a recent addition to the talk. I found Code Scene is a pretty cool app. Yeah. JetBrains is starting to introduce pieces from CodeScene into Rider and IntelliJ, but you can download this. You can run it in a Docker image. It will crawl your application. It will give you different visuals. It'll show you how the application talks to each other, to the different parts. It will show you where the healthy parts of code are and where the unhealthy parts of the code are. It's objective. So if you know that you need to get into the reporting area and that's a big red area, you can probably plan accordingly. Or maybe you find that there's one area of code that Raul always worked on. That's fine. But if Raul's going to go on vacation and we have work to do in that area and nobody has ever seen it before, that could probably be a problem. That might be a good time to say, I'm going to pair with Raul to work on this feature. So I start understanding it as well. And if Raul wins the lottery and decides to leave the company, at least we're kind of safe, the bus factor. So again, non-paid endorsement, but CodeSync seems to be a pretty cool little tool that can help you identify, focus, where do we want to make changes? And then you got, the communities of practice. You've got your team. You've got these ideas like, what if we had a theme of the week? Maybe when I submit my PRs, people are going to nitpick over it because they don't understand why I'm doing things. Or maybe we get overwhelmed with all the changes we could make. Having a theme of the week can actually be helpful. We're not going to solve all of the problems, but if you're in a method and you've got global variables, maybe pass it in as a parameter. Just whenever you're in a file, if you've got some globals, make it a parameter. And then maybe next week, we're just going to practice extracting methods. Maybe instead of having that big triangle looking code where you've got all the nested if statements in a loop, maybe you just pull that out into its own method. Just pick it up, put it over there. Don't worry about it. Find a decent name, extract a class, have some stateless functions. Maybe you decide, hey, now's a good time to start moving some things to a factory pattern or command adapter, observers, whatever. Introduce some concepts, and each week, each sprint, each month, whatever, just pick one thing that everybody's going to do and get comfortable with. You'll see the momentum start to pick up where there aren't the arguments as much because we've already agreed these are good things to do, and they get to be pretty easy because we do them often. This is probably a slide that some people are going to recognize very well, and some people might not. I'm of the older generation where we used to love installing car stereos. Uh, we, buddy would crash his car, we'd pull out the old stereo, put it in the new car, and we'd wire everything up. and then maybe we'd find it didn't work so good. So then eventually we said, hey, what if we actually just plugged this stereo into a workbench, gave it power, and tested the speakers? Let's see if the CD player works. We learned to test the unit by itself before we had to rip the dashboard apart. And then we just knew that these are all the interfaces we needed. We decoupled the dependencies. We didn't have to hardwire everything. We also knew that we tested this independently. So when we change the oil, we don't have to make sure the radio still works. And that might seem overly simplistic, but I've seen this enough times where any time you do anything to the car, you have to test everything in the car. Yeah, if I swap out the battery, I probably want to make sure that the stereo still turns on, but I shouldn't have to play every CD to make sure they still work. And if we had more time, I would explain what CDs are to some people. Um, the ability to isolate is another huge thing that a team could do. I worked with a team who they didn't think they could do anything because there was 150 developers across the world on the website that they built. So they built some iframes. I get it. Iframes probably aren't the cleanest thing, but what they found is every time they made a mistake, it was very isolated. They would screw something up. Oh, my test broke. Let me fix that. Let me fix this. And then they got to plug it into the main app and everything worked. The team was able to deploy changes for their area multiple times a day. The people sitting in a couple of cubes over, they were stuck on the quarterly release cycle because they had to test everything. So just find some creative ways. It doesn't have to be perfect, but find some ways to isolate. And if you can isolate the way that your code works, you can also isolate your pipelines. I get that some companies have DevOps teams and you have to commit all the code together and it has to get all tested together and it takes hours or days or weeks. Um, Maybe just have a pipeline where you can run your own test. You can build your own plugin or your widget. Find a way to pull more and more into what you can control. And then you'll still have some tests and automation that you might want to verify when the entire app gets put together. But the more that you can isolate that, the more power you're going to have and the more choices you're going to make that are within your team's control. And think about how you're organizing things as well. This might look like a very well organized workbench. This is what I would expect to see if I go to somebody's house and I need a 10 millimeter wrench. I know exactly where it is. Um, this might be how we organize our applications. We got our views and our services and our controllers and our repositories and our configs. And if you're looking for a view or a controller or a service, you go to that folder. It seems to make sense until you say, my kid put a hole in the wall and I need to fix drywall. Okay, what do I need? I need some tape, I need a knife, band-aids, or maybe I need to fix a toilet, or I fix a light switch, or I have to, um, change the oil in my car. If I think about what I'm actually having my purpose for, I'm going to have a very different looking toolbox. I'm going to have a drywall toolbox. I'm going to have one toolbox for plumbing work. I'm going to have another toolbox for working on the car. Yeah, I'm probably going to have the same tools duplicated. I'm not optimizing to have one wrench and one knife. I'm going to have band-aids in all of these boxes. But when I have the problem, I grab what I need. So how does this apply to code? Well, maybe instead of having folders for views and controllers and services, maybe I have a person folder, which has the view, the controller, the service, the repo. Here are all the things I need for that person. Here is all the stuff I need for an order. If you can organize your code now by doing that, eventually, if you want, it might be pretty easy to pull it out into a microservice. Maybe you can just easily break up that monolith by just organizing where things are. Maybe you can even start to organize your teams. So instead of having our UI team, a backend team, the database team, the DevOps team, maybe you start having the reporting team. or order fulfillment team, where you're bringing all the tools that you need together. No, I'm not calling developers tools. Sorry. Stakeholders. So once we get outside of the team, here are some of the areas that I think for developers, I know I have struggled a lot in this area. Um, Early in my career, I heard about the Peter Principle, which basically says that people will keep getting promoted to their highest level of incompetency. So I do good, I get promoted, I learn how to do good at that next level, and eventually I'm going to get promoted to a spot where the things that I used to do to succeed are not the things I have to do to succeed now, and I might not be able to figure that out. I used to blame people for that. It was a label of hate. Page is Peter principled, right? It was an easy way to dismiss people. As I've gone through my own career, I've realized I have done this many times, and I found that I consider a hermit crab to be my career animal. If anybody's had hermit crabs for their kids, they will move into bigger shells. And I found that every time I'm getting really comfortable in a position, I recognize I've grown into my shell and it's got nice and cozy in there, but it's also limiting my growth. So myself, like many of you, are continuing to go out into new positions. 50% of the people or more that we work with could be in a position that they're growing into yet. And yeah, they might not be doing a great job at it. But you also have to recognize that as they're climbing that hierarchy, they're probably dealing with things that you were not aware of. There's a cascade of brown stuff that they're dealing with. And that can put pressure on them and they can make the best decisions that they're aware of and maybe they don't know how to handle it. So maybe there's an opportunity to help the people that are impacting the way that you operate. Jerry Weinberg says consulting may be defined as the art of influencing someone at their request. This is not capital C consulting. Here's my business card, Dustin Thostenson, consultant. This is influencing somebody at their request. If it isn't their request, you are inflicting help. You're shooting on people. You should do this. You should do that. If you can build a relationship and they're open to recommendations, now you actually might be able to help the people help shape the environment you work in. And there's some really easy ways that we can do this. You can visualize wasted time. Going back to that prefactoring concept, make the change easy, then make the easy change. These are horrible graphics, but maybe in your Kanban board, maybe have a column called prefactor. Maybe when the work comes out, you put it in this column and we're going to look at this code. We got to work in this file. Let's clean it up before we do anything with it. Just make it part of your workflow. One of my favorite singers, Ani DeFranco, says, every tool is a weapon if you hold it right. Yes, I'm talking about Jira. There are ways that we can make changes that work in our benefit that will be visible to other people. A cumulative flow diagram, I'm not going to get deep into it. I would highly recommend you understand them a little bit. There's a visual which shows how work flows through our system. And if you find that it's taking a long time to do things, that's fine. I took some data and I basically just changed the examples in here to say, what if we prefactored the code? What if we said we're going to make the change easy and then make the easy change? This is data that our product owners and managers will actually be able to use. You will see over time that the amount of time we're spending prefactoring our code will reduce. And the time to implement that change is going to be quicker. You can capture this and start seeing over time how that growth is helping people out. Uh, you, we know about WIP. We want to limit WIP. Um, we know that as I take on two different things, 20% of my time is spent context switching. I have to put down the old thing and pick up a new thing. If I have three things I'm working on, that 20% context switching is cumulative. So if I'm trying to divide and conquer and I'm working on a lot of different things, I'm actually wasting a lot of time. And again, we can capture this in Jira and Rally. You can capture this to say, what if we had a whip of one? What if the team worked on one thing at a time? Let's run that experiment and see how much we get done. Maybe if you're the manager, you can hold that big brown umbrella over your team, and they don't sell the umbrellas as brown. You have to earn that. But give the team protection to experiment some things, and you can look at the data over time. That's going to help people understand what they might not. There's math that you can use. So if they don't believe in your whip theory, you can tell them about Little's law. That can be very helpful. And you can try to not worry about making that big bang, but try to make a lot of little bangs. Just make different changes, find how you're going to track it, give them the data. It will build up the confidence. The proof is in the pudding. You have to show wins early. I've seen teams argue about tech debt for years. Finally, the manager said, whatever, take it, take a month off, fix it, and nothing happens because they haven't built up the practices and then they have lost all credibility. So start making those small changes, work with the teams, find ways to influence people. Maybe you don't have access to John here, who ultimately makes that decision, but maybe you've got connections with other people. I like to play a game when I consult, where I use not just industry terms, but I'll make up some of my own terms or my own metaphors or analogies, and I'll start telling people those things. Uh, don't kick a hockey, or if you want to kick a hockey puck into a basketball hoop, don't call it cricket. That's something I made up. And if I'm in a meeting and I hear John say, look, we don't need to be kicking hockey pucks into basketball hoops here, I know where he got that from. So find simple messages that you can share and allow the system to kind of permeate that. I've got these trophies. I never hand them out, but I silently award them. Who had the most words in that meeting? Who had the best ideas? And I think about this diagram every day. As a developer, I like to go from left to right. I got data and I can color that with information and make some connections with knowledge. I can get insights, and then I can finally tell you what that path is. I want to tell you these things so you come to the same conclusion. But if I'm in a meeting with executives, all they want to know is what is the problem, what is the solution, and how are we going to get there? I try to do this because then they will listen to me. If I start off on the data side, they will get overwhelmed. I use the knowledge when they start asking deeper questions. And when somebody really wants to start digging into it, when another developer wants to get into implementation details, hey, let's have that conversation offline. The leaders don't care about that. If you want to influence your managers, you have to be able to do one, two, and three. And that means you have to think about it ahead of time and you have to be comfortable giving them this when they ask for it, but try not to force it. And also be aware of how they might interpret it. So, in summary, we start with ourselves. We start building up our technical skills. We do the work. We make the commitment to make the change. You build the things. You lead by example, so you can take all the things from yourself, take that to the team, and start doing isolation. Find areas to get your independent pipelines. Do something to give your team that ability to make their own choices. And then find ways to effectively work with the stakeholders. There are a lot of other examples that I could share here, but you have to understand what somebody's motivation is, what their ability to understand a problem is, and how they can help make a simple decision without risk that will help create a better environment for you and your team. And as I mentioned, we do have slides available, and I think we've even got a little bit of time if anybody had questions or if there are some successes that you have found that I did not cover here.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, do we have questions? Please feel free to either take yourself off mute or raise your hand or put something in chat. There was a lot
And I
of
am willing to hang out afterwards too. I recognize some people might need to leave, but if you guys want to chat, I've got time.
awesome. It's a lot of great information there.
I know I was coming along with a lot of fun and sort of snarky comments in chat. And it's not snarky, but uh, a
Oh,
lot of fabulous, fabulous stuff. I think someone said, I think it was Danny that said any talk that starts off with a Jerry Weinberg quote is kicking it off right. Um, and there's a density of helpful stuff in this discussion that is awesome and amazing. And yeah, from katas to practicing and being invited to offer help and suggestions. Yeah, fabulous, fabulous stuff. And code scene, yeah. And I
hmm.
did. I did reach out to Andy to get him on LinkedIn and see if I can get him in to talk. So that was a wonderful suggestion that the
Oh,
group,
great.
yeah.
I realized I wasn't even looking at the comments here, our chat.
And something about your pudding slide looks off to me, by the way.
You should be off-putting.
Uh, I
Danny has a question.
okay, go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, so let's say you're good at refactoring, but is it possible to do too much? Is it okay to have a little bit of tech debt sometimes, uh, strategically?
Yeah, it depends, right? You can
I've been
also
told
be so
no.
clever, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I've been told some people they say, no, I get rid of all of it. I'm really good at it. And I'm like, wow, okay, I'd like to be that good. But uh, I will get thrown off my team if I say, no, we have to fix all the debt before we do anything useful.
When Ward Cunningham coined the phrase, he was treating it like the financial concept, where sometimes you take on debt because you are making an investment.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know, as a consultant that's come in a number of different places, it's hard to. I live, eat, and breathe ruthless refactoring, but you can also apply the golden rule. Just leave the code a little bit better than when you came in, and you would be really surprised how quickly that can have an impact. If everyone that is accessing code just does one little thing, spends 5 minutes when they're in the code to make it better each day, it it's surprising.
Yeah, the camping rule. And that code should be something you care about right now, not something you randomly saw. That can make a big difference in how effective you are with your time.
I I've been an independent consultant for about 2 decades now, and one of the best things that it's happened for me is I have some small clients. Like one of them, their budget is 7 grand this year. That's it. So I am very well aware of the time that I spend and the value that they get for that. When I go to large enterprises, that gets lost. People will find that they could burn tens of thousands of dollars just playing with a code that is not going to give them any value for it. And I think that for me, working on some small places, I realize I need to be able to do something with this money. I have to think about ROI as a developer. I am not being paid to make the prettiest code possible. Uh,
Astrid?
yeah.
I like how Kevlin Henney switched to the term technical neglect instead of technical debt. because it's not about the debt. If you repay it, it's an investment and it's calculated and it's good. But if you take on debt and you don't repay, you neglect your debt, then you're in trouble. And so I rather use the term technical neglect now and make sure that we at least pay the interest rates on the technical debt, and perhaps also a little bit of the underlying debt, so that we progress towards the better world we want to live in.
And if you neglect something long enough, it's abuse.
Yeah.
I think Lada's next.
Actually, I should trigger the pre-conversation to my thing I wanted to say. I actually like Ken Beck's options even more than that, because options actually make you think differently. Like, instead of technical debt, you're thinking of every time you refactor, you add options. So like, if you don't refactor, you run out of options and you're dead. You have no way out. But what was fascinating conversation with him was like, wait, you draw the second point as having more options than the 0 point where we had no code. When we have no code, don't we have the most options? And he's like, no, because you're actually creating tools in your universe, right? You're creating things that you can use. And now you can basically like parse PDF as one action, and it's just like this, right? So like this kind of creates an option, and that kind of changed how I design things. That was fascinating to me, because I thinking that actually changed the way I code, which was interesting and unexpected.
Nice.
Anyway, so that's the options part. Sorry, am I taking too much if I say another thing?
You're fine. You're fine, Lada.
The last 3 months have been mind-blowing to me from the point of view of I actually have been like a crafter, and like I value code quality so much. I value good code so much. I value team communication and all of that. But like, I found that maybe that's not the speed you want to everywhere and every time, right? So I started to be like, oh, maybe here I don't need to do, because if you're doing a script that you're gonna throw away, and if it's a one-off script, that's totally fine to AI it if you want. And then we just, like me, Steve, Paige, we just at Agile 2025, we delivered crazy value. Crazy value. Worked 3 days, and nobody thought we would do half of the things we did. And we didn't look at the code at all.
I
And-
honestly thought all we would do is get a product list of things they wanted. So sorry.
Exactly. And at no point we're in danger right now. We are not in danger in any way, because if we need to deliver the next feature, we can, because we can refactor from where we are, right? So like it feels like it's a separate skill that I'm just now learning to be like, how do I balance? Where do I balance? How do I like it feels like a driving at the right speed, balancing risk versus how much you refactor and so on.
Yep.
Sorry. Thanks.
No sorry needed. Thank you, Lada. Patrick?
Yeah. So it's from the question regarding is it okay to have technical depth, and I think Lada covered it a little bit, but I want to say, of course it is. Like, are you working with a product and you are exploring a market? Maybe like if you're working on something big at a large company, maybe you don't shift direction a lot. But if you're working at a startup or in a new area, what the product should do might shift. It might shift again in a week. So if you every time you shift, optimize it perfectly for that scenario, you spend a lot time paying off debts that you actually decided to default on later on. So it's totally okay, and it's also totally okay to realize that paying off some debt is too big, and that's one of the reasons why I love the strangler pattern. You realize that you need to interface some other way to the world, but you can't rework everything. So it builds build tools around your existing code, and then you slowly kill it until you have a good new working code, and that's a good way forward to pay off the debt in a reasonable pace.
I think about Tim Woods, the acronym for lean manufacturing. Tim Woods stands for transportation, inventory, blah, blah, blah. There's all these different areas where waste can occur. Um, and one of them is over processing. And I learned years ago that Toyota had done such a good job building their cars, but they over processed them. So if you were in an accident, you might realize that they painted the front and the back of the bumper. You don't need the back of the bumper painted. So I think that as professionals, yeah, we have those abilities to kind of look at it and again, look at that flow to say, is it slowing me down too much? Is it acceptable? And to make those choices and not have to, I know binaries are easier, it's all or nothing, but yeah, just learn the skills and keep applying them where they're going to help. Find the flow. I was at a recent client and they had one application which the company got sold. They bought another company and that company had been around for 8 years. They were making money. There was a code scene did not like the app. It raised a lot of flags, but it did what they needed. It was a startup. And yeah, they copy pasted a lot of things, but that was fine because they needed to make sure that they can get something to market. Once they prove that they can make money off of it, then we started to try to clean it up. But if they had perfected all that code and they couldn't get to the market and they drained all the money, that code's worthless. Fire the guy who's
I
thinking.
feel I feel definitely pain if I live in code that is more spaghetti than ordered. So I'm guilty of over engineering sometimes, and I'm probably also guilty of over refactoring. But if I think of what is the real value I'm trying to produce, I always see that what I do now is profitable in the future, as my work makes my colleagues faster, because the code I leave behind is easier to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easier to grasp. And it's still true. The most of the time we are in code, we are reading code.
Yep.
And it's so important that you can understand what you read.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd rather spend another hour renaming variables or fields or methods, even if that doesn't account to the goal I'm reaching now, just because I know if I rename them, the people don't have to do the struggle I had with understanding what the code actually does.
Yep.
And sometimes it's really as easy as just taking the API, the public method, and redirect it to one that is named correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And you have no trouble with outside world and still have something better in the code. And so I love beautiful code, and I have a feeling for my code, and I hate when it's neglected and ugly in the corner.
Yeah, that's a huge point. And one of the things when I first learned TDD many years ago, I learned the red-green refactor loop. And refactor was the hardest thing for me to remember to do because I went from red to green and I need to go back to red. Let's go, go, go. I had a red-green loop.
Yeah.
And eventually I got into the habit of red-green refactor and then adopting the mindset of ruthlessly refactoring. Yes, I can improve that. And this is my journey as a code crafter as well, too. Getting into the point. And then the next lesson I had to learn was, and talked about this in chat early on, is teaching myself to stop and ask, is it good enough?
Mm.
Right? Because you can gold plate your code. And the is it good enough to me started off with asking myself, am I gold plating? And after I got to the point where I would ask that question when I was refactoring, I backed it off to, is it good enough? And it really highlights code katas. And George, I'll get to you in just a second. Code katas are there to help you practice one simple thing. So often when people start doing code katas, they get in and they solve the whole problem. And they're practicing solving the problem, not a coding skill. So when I do a code kata and when I do workshops with teams, I go in, today we're going to practice extract method and learning Command Option M or whatever the keystroke is in their IDE to do that. And we will open up Gilded Rose or the Tennis Kata, which are refactoring katas, and just practice for 10 minutes extracting code using that keystroke. And that's it. Okay, done for the day. Let's move on.
That's another step missing in red-green refactor. There's this red-green refactor think, then red-green refactor.
Yeah. George?
I just wanted to follow up with Astrid's concern about churn, so to speak, in naming or something like this. And my last project was putting in an alternative authenticational model. And if I had not gone in and changed the old code's names so that it would be clear what is the old method, which was still live, and what is going to be the new method. And if you look at it, you could look at it and say, well, part of it was making a happy place for the new code to live. And I agree, right? That's important. But the other part is that leaving the code, in my opinion, less confusing for the next one, even though it turns out that, simply renaming these things generated, 40 files of in the PR, right? But again, it's one of those things. I just did the PR, together, with the person who was reviewing it, and just cleared up anything she asked about. But to me, it's like this idea that you don't necessarily want to put the minimum change. It sort of goes back to that statement: you want to leave the campground cleaner than when you got there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to comment on some things I heard and maybe encourage some reframing. I put this in chat, but I want to do it in voice too. So the outcome of too much refactoring is not over-engineered or gold-plated. That's as soon as you think that, like, you're in a trap. The outcome of if the outcome you get is over-engineered or gold-plated, that's bad factoring. That's a problem that needs to be refactored. That shouldn't be where you try to get to with refactoring issue, something you try to get away from. Our goal with refactoring, the ultimate goal, should be the best design that we know how for the current set of requirements. Shouldn't be to accommodate some anticipated future requirement. That would be over-engineered. Only for the currently known set of requirements to the best of our current abilities. The consequence of over-refactoring is we get fired because we spent so much time refactoring, we didn't deliver features, and we lost the faith of the stakeholders who decide whether we get paid. That's the limit. And that's true in a startup. We only have 2 weeks of funding available, and we failed to deliver something that would give them the reason to give us more funding. That's a failure. It's true in the mega corporation, which is we decided that we want some of your principal engineers to go work on this other project that is more pressing. There's a uniformity there. It is just we failed to show that we can deliver the thing that the stakeholders care about because we did too much of things that they don't care about. In the long term, the refactoring absolutely is going to matter, but people who aren't programmers, they don't know how to understand that. So We have to show them as progress towards the things that they care about. I hope that made sense. There's a lot of ideas in there, but I think that we fall into some traps in this thinking. I'm all about more refactoring.
I really like that, Jay. Makes a lot of sense.
Excellent. And I'm actually going to stop the recording. That was a great place to stop. We don't have to stop talking, but I am going to stop the recording.